Why Israel? Welcome to this series about Israel and about what Israel means and about the times we live in and about Jerusalem and about the situation of Europe. And so we're going to open the Bible again to get a real understanding what is happening today. Because we live in the days that we see the restoration of the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. We see Jerusalem on the scene again. We see Islam and an Islamic empire on the rise. We see Europe coming back to power, uniting itself, and one cannot help but thinking back to the Roman Empire that once was around the Mediterranean. And when you look at the map today, you see how this new Europe is a kind of a revived Roman Empire already, but even bigger. And it is not just a Roman Empire that is in the world today, which is developing from an economic entity, an economic power, into a political power more and more. It's part of a world where all kind of power blocks are on the move. In Asia, in China is coming up. There's the United States of America. Africa is becoming aware of itself more and more. You have the United Nations as a kind of world parliament. All kind of things are on the move. But Europe, when you look at it from a biblical perspective, will be one of the main players in the future. This revived Roman Empire reminds you of the statue that Daniel saw in chapter 2 when he described the dream of Nebuchadnezzar to him. He saw the golden head, the silver breast, and the whole rest, and he said, these are empires that come one after another, and it will end with the feet of iron and clay. A nice detail there is this: iron and clay. It's a mixture, you might say, of the military strength, the iron that the Roman Empire had, because all these empires had certain characteristics. The golden head means a dictator, a king, an emperor, totally in power. Nebuchadnezzar could say, do this, and nobody could say anything different. The empire that came after the Babylonian Empire was the empire of the Medes and the Persians, and they had very strong laws. We read it in the book of Esther. When the king of the Persians had signed a law, even he could not change it. This king had signed a law to kill all the Jews in the empire, and when he became aware that Esther, his wife, was a Jew as well, he could not even change the law. The law was more powerful than he was. The only thing he could do was make another law and tell the Jews to defend themselves. And of course, there was a great victory, and Israel, the Jewish people, were not wiped out in the Persian Empire. So a strong law is a characteristic of the empire of the Medes and Persians. Then the Greek Hellenistic Empire under Alexander the Great. That was Hellenism, as it's called, humanism. The Greek invented, so to speak, democracy as a form of state. The Greek made the foundation for science, for mathematics. Pythagoras and all the Greek philosophers developed all the basic elements to develop technique and natural sciences, etc. They were a people that believed strongly in man. When you look at their gods, they're almost like men, with all the vices and good things. So humanism or Hellenism is the main characteristic of the empire of the Greek. Olympic Games with the beautiful human body, these games took place in the nude because the beautiful body should be shown. You see the sculptures, you see art. So the whole thing of humanism and science and sports and democracy, it's all brought into this world by the Greeks. And then after the Greeks came the Romans. And although they were a military power with their legions that defeated anybody else, culturally and philosophically and religiously they were not as strong as the Greeks. So whereas the Roman Empire conquered the Greek Empire, the Greeks, as it were, conquered Rome from the inside. When you were rich and you lived in Rome and you wanted to have a good teacher for your children, you were looking for a Greek slave, to buy him or hire him to teach philosophy, to teach the arts, to teach science, etc. So the spirit of the Greek Empire conquered Rome. Now, this whole statue then followed the line that Rome fell, but underneath Rome, in various forms, continued to be. The Roman Catholic Church took over when Christianity came into existence, and from one day to another, this new Christianity became the main philosophy in Europe. So the Roman Empire went on, but in a different shape and form. Das Heilige Römische Reich Deutsche Nation we've had in the Middle Ages. It went on and on and on. John in the book of Revelation talks about an empire that was, that is not, but will be. So it's going on, and now today we see the revival of this Roman Empire on the stage in Europe. When we look back at that statue that Daniel saw, we realize that at the end of the dream, the stone came from the mountain and struck this last empire at its feet. And the feet are a mixture of iron and clay. It means it has something of the military might in itself, the iron that Rome had, but the clay is more pointing towards the power to the people, democracy. When you read in the book of Revelation, the final of the 7 epistles to the 7 churches, you know the first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation start with that. The 7th and last of these letters is Laodicea, the letter to Laodicea. Now what does Laodicea mean? It means Laos, Dike. It means Laos means people, Dike means power or right. So the people decide. It's the same word as democracy, demos kratein. The people rule. So this final empire is a mixture of military strength as we have it in Europe, with all the armies and nuclear weapons and so forth. And at the same time, it is a democracy. It is power to the people. It is by votes that the people rule. It's a kind of dictatorship of the half plus one, who are then in control over the rest. So basically, Europe is built on 2 roots. The Judeo-Christian root, the biblical thinking, the 10 Commandments, Christianity that made Europe in what it is today. But there also has always been this Roman, Greek Hellenistic root. 2 roots in Europe. Over the centuries, the Judeo-Christian root was in power. And that has brought great blessings to the European countries. The presence of the Jews, although we hunted them down and often despised them, still had their positive, their blessing influence in the countries of Europe. But now the whole thing is changing. We killed the Jews and God is bringing them back to the land. And in the new constitution we said there will not be any mentioning of God or Christianity. It will be a new enterprise in the name of man. We, democracy, humanism, we can make it. We can bring in the new world. But that's not good news. And let me take you back in history to the first clash between this Greek, humanistic, Hellenistic root and the God of Israel. Remember the days of the Maccabees, when Alexander the Great in his Greek Empire had conquered Israel and conquered the rest of the world. After him, his generals tried to impose this humanistic philosophy also upon the Jews. And there was one day a ruler called Antioch Epiphanes. He was such a Hellenist, and he was so angry about these Jews who were serving God and were circumcised their male babies, damaged that beautiful human body by cutting off a small piece, who were not having these Olympic Games or sports events in great arenas, who were reading their scriptures, who were bringing sacrifices. He was so angry, he said, I'm going to bring this new humanistic culture over Israel. I will Hellenize these Jews. And I will do it by force. If they do not want to do it voluntarily, I will use my armies and my power to do it. So then you had this clash between the spirit of man of the Greeks and the God of Israel. Antioch Epiphanes entered Jerusalem. He put a big statue, a male statue of the great god Zeus, the great Greek god, in the temple, where it's totally forbidden to have any images. And that in the temple, that's an abomination. That's blasphemy. The pig is the most unclean animal in the Bible. He started to sacrifice pigs on the altar in the temple of Jerusalem. He forbade the Jews to do anything Jewish. He forbade them to keep Sabbath. He forbade them to circumcise. He forbade them to have their religion developed. And you could be killed if you refused to do so. So the temple in Jerusalem was totally defiled. And then Orthodox Jews went to their sword. A small bunch. Judas Maccabeus. There's a great oratorium by the musician Georg Friedrich Handel, who made a beautiful piece of music about this uprising of the Maccabees under Judas Maccabeus. And lo and behold, this bunch of Orthodox Jews, who were nothing in comparison with the mighty Greek armies of Antioch Epiphanes, they were victorious. Finally, they won. And then they cleansed the temple in Jerusalem. They took out the statue of Zeus and all the pigs. They cleansed everything, made it pure and holy again, and started to worship the God of Israel in the way he wants to be worshipped. This cleansing of the temple, this rededication of the temple, is celebrated every year in one of the Jewish feasts. It is the feast of Hanukkah, which takes place in December, when the light was brought back to the temple, when the oil of the Holy Spirit didn't cease, when the God of Israel was praised and worshipped and served in the temple there in the heart of Jerusalem. So this Hellenistic root, this root of humanism, this spirit of man will clash with the God of Israel. It is already in the beginning of the Bible. When you have paradise and Adam and Eve, then the Nachash, the snake, Nachash is serpent, is snake, but Nachash also means in the Hebrew the glorious one, the intelligent one, the magnificent one. So he was a celestial being, the devil. And so when Eve saw him, she was impressed. And when this heavenly being started to talk to her and said, well, you should choose for yourself. You should choose for you as man. God doesn't want you to eat these fruits. He doesn't want you to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because he understands if you do, you will be like him, because he knows about good and evil. You're still innocent, but he knows. So if you take this decision, you will be like God. That's the fall of man. That man choose for himself, choose as it were to be God himself, to make his own judgments instead of listening to God and obeying him and accepting what God says about good and evil. The fall of man. You will be a God in the depth of your own being. The Nachash, the Satan, the devil said. Lucifer, who was looking. Lucifer means bearer of light. Nachash, magnificent one. But the opposite, of course, was true. When man had chosen for himself and against God, then he fell. Then death entered into the world. And the whole of creation was subdued under this judgment of death. This principle of death came into creation. And since then, we are living on a dying planet, and we live in bodies that are dying. Death is a principle that rules, by the way, that is contrary to evolutionary thinking. Evolutionary thinking makes us believe that we go up and up and up and up, and from primitive beginnings we have developed and we will develop, and we will come maybe one day to Superman or whatever new evolvement of the human being. No. The principle of death we see in nature. We understand that creation had many more forms. We see it when we dig the earth and we find the fossils and the remnants. And there have been much more species like the dinosaurs and others that we don't have today. It's one big decay. It's a dying process. And it's all because of the sin of man. So man thinking that he is God, it is a total illusion. When man thinks that by his humanistic, human nature, almost divine in himself, can bring about the kingdom, can bring about a world of peace, can bring about a new Europe and a new world and peace and wealth for all, and equality for all. And we've seen it in the history, what natural man can do. We've seen it in the French Revolution, where you had this spirit, ni Dieu ni maître, no God and no master. And we will make a new society, and the end was rivers of blood. We've seen it in the empire by Hitler, who said this will be 1,000-year Reich. This will be peace on earth. This will be national socialism. We will kill the Jews because they're the rats. They spread diseases. They are like parasites on mankind. When we have dealt with that problem, we will create a world of peace and of wealth for everyone. We've seen it in communism. A promise of a classless society, equality for all, income for all, socialism, etc. The end of Hitler was rivers and rivers of blood, Jewish blood and Christian blood. Communism, it meant rivers of blood. In Russia, under Stalin, I think 50 million were killed. And what happened under Mao Zedong in China, one can hardly describe. So all these attempts to build in the name of man, paradise as it were, they all have failed. Now, this whole new Europe that is built in the spirit of man, like a new form of humanism, a revival of Hellenism, it will ultimately lead to the rise to power of what the Bible calls Antichrist. And Antichrist means two things. The word anti in Greek means, first of all, in the place of. It will be a Christ in the place of Christ. It will be a kind of Prince of Peace, a genius, who seems to be able to solve all the problems of the world, who will deal with the problem of pollution, who will deal with the problem of the wars in the world, who will deal with the problem of poverty, who will deal with the problem of the scarce resources of energy by giving a judged way of dividing everything. So he really will come with great philosophies, with great hopes, with great ideas. He will bring peace on earth. He will be Antichrist, a Prince of Peace, instead of the real Christ. But anti also means against. So he will look like a lamb of God, so to speak, like a brilliant ruler, but his inspiration comes from below. He will be inspired by the powers of darkness. And so he will finally show his true nature, which is against Christ and against God. Anti also means against. And so he will finally do what all these dictators in the course of the history of Europe have done. He will start to persecute the Jews. He will start to persecute Bible-believing Christians. He will really go against everything that has to do with the serving of God. And you feel in this coming to power of Europe as if all the things of the previous empires that Daniel saw in the statue come with it, but that the driving force of this new Europe is this spirit of democracy, of humanism, combined with the military powers of the Romans. And it will lead to the coming of Antichrist. So, brothers and sisters, I don't think that the development of Europe is something we should look at in a positive way. And you feel already how irritation against Jews and Christians start to build up. You see countries, and I heard it about Norway, that want to shake off their Christian past and develop in something like a neutral or a humanistic or a general type of state. This new spirit is on the move, and it will lead to a lot of trouble in the future. But praise God, He is in control. The return of the Jewish people back to the promised land shows you that God is leading history. And even if these almost demonic developments are going to take place worldwide, by the sheer fact that He restores Israel in preparation of the kingdom to come, makes you understand that Antichrist or whatever demonic powers will not have the final word in this world. But God is moving forward to realize His goal. And His goal is the coming of His kingdom and the coming of the King of the kingdom. And after this demonic period, Jesus will come in glory. He will defeat the Antichrist. He will sit on the throne of his father David. And nature, even creation itself, will be brought to renewal. The beautiful things that the prophets of the Old Testament see, the lion with the lamb, peace, etc., it will all become a reality. So give your life to this King to come, and you are heading for a glorious future.